Hello class, these are our Algebra 1 notes for section 415. This is inverse functions part 1. So with inverse functions, we are looking at when the input becomes the output and vice versa. So we're switching around our input and output, and that is called the inverse. So let's go ahead and write inverse in this first blank here. Suppose Han lives 400 meters from school and walks to school. A linear function gives Han's distance to the school. D in meters after he has walked W meters from home is defined by D equals 400 minus W. So just to get an idea of how this formula works really quick, let's say that he has walked 100 meters. So if he has walked 100 meters, that means W is equal to 100. Then the way I would figure out his distance to the school is I would use this formula and I would say, well, then D equals 400 minus 100, which equals 300. So when W is 100 and he has walked 100 meters, then he has 300 meters is his distance to the school. And that's my D. So I have my input is my W, and my output is my distance to the school. So my input is the amount he's walked, and then my output is distance from school. So sometimes it's nice to just try out a formula and kind of understand how it works before you start answering questions about it. So with our first question, we're asked, what does the equation tell us? Well, the equation tells us his distance to the school in meters. So the distance from the school and then we're asked what is the input, what's the output? Well, our input, our variable is W, and that's going to be the distance Han has walked in meters. And his output is going to be D, which is the distance to the school in meters. So the next question is saying, well, what if we want to know how far he's walked given the distance left from school? So instead of starting with W, what if we start with how far Han is from the school? So what if we know Han is, say, 250 meters away from the school? How could we figure out his distance that he's walked? So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the equation. I don't know if you remember us talking about these as literal equations earlier on this year, where we take an equation and we rearrange it and we solve for a different variable. So with those equations, sometimes we had lots of different variables, like P equals 2L plus 2W. So on the equations now there where we have only an input and an output, it's like I'm solving for my input instead, and I'm going to have that in terms of my output. So I've written this equation down, and what I want to do is I want to now solve it for W. So basically what I'm doing is I'm rearranging. So the first thing I notice is that W is minus. So I'm going to go ahead and add W on both sides. And then I have W plus D is equal to 400. So I can't actually add the W and the D together. They're both variables, but I can write them on the same side. I can put a plus sign between them. So now I'm trying to get the W by itself, so I want the D to move over onto the other side of the equation. So now I'm going to subtract D on both sides. And now my rearranged equation says that W is equal to 400 minus D. So this is my rearranged equation. I have solved for W. So now when I look at my input variable is now D. So if I look at this, it says W equals, so W is basically my output variable at this point. So I have swapped my input and my output. My input is now D, which is the distance to the school in meters. And it's equal to W, like W is the answer I get out of it. And so W is my output. And W is the distance Han has walked in meters. So what I have done is I've taken this equation, pretty simple equation with only two variables. I looked at the input and the output, and I said, wouldn't this be nice if it was solved and I had it rearranged? So instead of inputting W and getting D as an output, it was the other way around. And so we rewrote our equation, we solved it for W and we rearranged, and now our inputs and our outputs are swapped. So my input from above, W, is now my output. And my output from above, D, is now my input. So this rearranged function is known as the inverse function. And I can tell that because my variables, my input and my output, have been swapped. That's one way to tell. All right, so this is just an introduction to equations today. Hopefully this will, to inverse equations today. Hopefully this will connect back to what you remember about solving literal equations early on. And we're still working with those input and output ideas as well. As always, class, if you have questions, please make sure you ask.